Hello there, and welcome to this first episode of the China AI podcast. My name is Stephen Gugu, and I'm going to be, the host for the podcast. Really excited to be, kicking off this journey. It's something that I've been thinking about for quite a bit of time, and I'm finally happy that 28th of April 2026 is the day we start the journey. So the AI is called, the podcast is called China AI. Now, let me be clear, it's not China AI. I tried out the name with a few people and they mentioned that, if you speak very fast, it sounds like China AI. No, it is China AI. Just to mention why China AI. China AI is, it's T and AI. Chai is in Swahili, is a Swahili word that means tea. And really, I want to just name that resonated with warm conversations about AI, where we just have a casual conversation, but then very in-depth, very deep conversations in this case around AI. Some of the stuff we're going to be talking about is just how do we contextualize AI? How do we take all the potential you've had about AI and then sort of like take that conversation and make it a reality at the end of the day. The other thing we're going to be doing is, just contextualizing things in the continent. There's lots of conversations going on from an AI perspective, and a number of those have been set up, from an international perspective. You hear lots of podcasts, you go to YouTube and so forth. There's lots of things happening. So the key question is, at least I want to try, is to just get some real conversation in the continent. How are people using AI? How is it impacting different sectors and so forth? So we're going to be having those kinds of conversations. So I really hope that you're going to enjoy these, and this is going to be, something you look forward to every 2 weeks, because it's going to be something practical. By the time you're done, I'd like you to be able to live with one tangible thing that you can be able to use on a day-to-day basis for, improving your work, improving your life, in this case, using AI, in this case. So a bit about myself. My name is Stephen Gugu. I'm based out of Nairobi, in Kenya. I do a couple of things. Number one is that I'm an entrepreneur, stroke advisor in a company called Investia Africa. Investia does three key things, actually four key things, I should mention. First thing is that we do programs, and these are programs which are focused around access to finance, because really our vision is how do we create a bridge that helps capital to flow to the most deserving entrepreneurs, and how do we make sure that the most deserving entrepreneurs are able to meet with the right kind of capital in this case. And so we do that through the programs element, where we run programs which are focused around access to finance, around angel investing, around getting research-based ventures to be able to access capital. So we do a lot of that kind of work and invest your ventures. We also do advisory work, and we're known very much for the kind of work we do around financial modeling, valuations, due diligence, M&A, capital raising, and so forth. You can learn more about the kind of work at investia.com. Third thing we do is we're looking to raise a fund that's going to be investing into SMEs, startups, in the continent, to be able to solve some of the key challenges we have in the continent. And the last thing is that we have a few tools that we pushed out into the market that I think would be useful. We're also pushing out some AI tools that I think might be of interest to you in this case. So I'm an entrepreneur. That's one of the key things I do. The second thing I do is that I'm a facilitator. I teach at Strathmore Business School, Strathmore University Business School. And for that, I facilitate private equity and venture capital classes under the private equity and venture capital programs. I also facilitate in the owner managers program, where we teach entrepreneurs mini MBA, but I focus on the private equity and venture capital space. I have been invited to also facilitate in different spaces. Lagos Business School, I've been invited there, taught similar things that I speak about. And of course, also in several other business schools, I've been invited as not a guest faculty, but as a speaker in this case. I've done some stuff with Imperial College in London, some stuff with Oxford, and so forth. So really excited to start this journey and share a bit more. I'm also one of the key facilitators with the Africa Angel Academy. And if you want to learn about angel investing, that's probably something to hit me up, and then we can talk about it. I'm also an investor, been an angel investor for a number of years, but now transitioning to fund management, as I just mentioned. I think that's a bit about myself. So angel investor and the Victoria Business Angels Network. On top of that, I'm a husband and a father to four daughters. They keep me, pretty busy. And I enjoy hanging out with them. My key interest, I would say, at the core, is how to unlock capital for the most deserving entrepreneurs in the continent that are solving some of the critical challenges we have in the continent. So that's my key interest. That's what I'm really focused on every single day. But of course, from a personal perspective, I love spending time with, the family. I love two wheels and nature. So I love riding my bicycle in nature. Usually, I don't do road biking in Nairobi. Yeah, that's has its own pluses and minuses. I love taking walks in nature. And I have to say, I enjoy working with AI. Hence the reason why I really wanted to have a podcast that's all about AI, China AI in this case. So I'm really looking forward to this journey to see what I'm going to learn, what I'm going to share from the different speakers we're going to be having. So this is the official welcome to China AI. Karibu sana, as we say it in Swahili. Um, so as I mentioned in the quick intro, the whole inspiration behind this podcast is really just the potential that you always hear about AI, that AI can help us to solve cancer, climate change, I don't know, all manner of things. But then the reality on the ground is that most people, once they've had that, they ask themselves, okay, how do I actually take that potential that I hear about and make it a reality for myself, for my office, for my personal life, and so forth? And I have found that getting the right kinds of use cases is quite tricky, right? Even for me, it was quite tricky to figure out which use cases, how much can I use AI, where, at what point do I stop using AI? Am I being, I don't know, fake? Is it me really if I'm using AI? And it's almost like there's a certain, I don't know whether it's guilt or something that some people feel when they say that, I've done a blog, but I use AI to sort of like write it. It's almost like it's not me, it's someone else. And so really it's just trying to have these conversations and contextualize the use of AI from a day-to-day basis. One of the really nice podcasts I listened to, and I'll speak about that in a second, is a podcast where one of the speakers was just talking about this idea of the 80-20 rule, where most of us, this potential for AI, it's very hard to put it back to, the point where we're able to use it really well. And so most of us end up using AI, to generate the 20% value, yeah, and not necessarily to generate the 80% value. And so what I'd like to do through these conversations that we're going to be having is to take this potential of AI and help you to move away from just, drafting the simple emails, making very simple queries to get to a point where, your AI use will be able to translate to the 80% value that you should be getting out of it, and not just the 20% in this case. So, that's a whole sort of like inspiration. But I have to say, one of the really good podcasts I've been listening to, which really inspired me to do this, is a podcast called Beyond the Prompt. You can find it on Spotify and several other spaces. But it's hosted by two speakers. One is Jeremy Utley, who's a professor at Stanford, and Henrik Weldon, who's a founder at a company called Prehype and a co-founder at Backbox. Really, I listened to, it's called Beyond the Prompt. And really what they try to do is just to give you very practical use cases of AI. Of course, it's set up internationally. So I think some of the use cases, they're probably not as contextually relevant to you locally. And I really like that podcast because after listening to each over a period of time, I started getting a better sense of, how to use AI to, generate some really good value for myself, for my organization, and so forth. And I was like, what, why don't we have similar conversations in the continent? And so I said, what, I think I'm going to do that so that people out there who probably are still asking themselves those questions, they can be able to figure that out. Of course, also really excited to think about where is AI going. And not only just the stories that we're hearing that it's all positive and everything. What are some of the risks with AI that we need to be aware of and so forth? Real are some of those risks? What do we need to be thinking about them? But really, inspiration beyond the prompt. And I, shout out to the team that puts that, podcast together. I really recommend that you, check it out. I think you'll find it fascinating. And they host some really good speakers from different sectors who share their own views from an AI perspective. Very tangible also by the time you're leaving. You have a few things that, you can, work on in this case. Okay. So a bit about my AI journey. My AI journey started back in 2023. So as I was preparing for this initial, monologue before we start inviting the guests, I went back to my ChatGPT and I checked when was my first query. And I found it was actually 8th of January 2023, right? That was really fascinating, and it's curious. I even checked what did I really, what was my first query, and the query was I asked, "Who is Stephen Gugu?" Right? Now, this is not about vanity. One of the key things that anyone who's a very good user of AI will tell you is that you first of all want to ask AI questions to which you know the answers to, because then it gives you a sense of just how good it is in terms of answering the questions and what you should expect on any other questions that you share. And so I think I asked that question just to see how good it was in terms of describing me. And the funny thing is, in 2023, it told me that it didn't have any data about Stephen Google. And I was shocked, right? Because if I go to Google, type Stephen Google, I get a number of hits in this case. But really, it told me where AI was. I've not done a similar, search of late, but I'm sure if I did it, I would get much better information. And that gives you a sense of just where AI has come from. I followed that up, just asking very simple things, draft for me a quick story that, I can share with my kids when they go to bed and I don't want to go and pick the book and read it, in this case. Draft for me a simple blog. And I have to say at that point, it was pure curiosity, just to sort of like figure out, what are the limits? How good is AI? And I have to say at that point, if you compare then and today, AI has shifted a lot. And if you're not already in the panel, you need to join it and so forth. And so, just to continue with that, I checked sort of in terms of my usage, 2023 and 2026. And ChatGPT did for me a quick computation and told me that just as at April of 20, I have done 10 times more queries than I did in the whole of 2023, right? Which tells you that I'm using AI as a co-pilot, as a co-worker, as another brain that I work with in this case on a day-to-day basis. And it helps me a lot in terms of the different things, not only from a business perspective, even from a personal perspective. And we'll speak about some of the use cases as we move along. So just to give you a context, a sense of just how I work with AI. So when I was thinking about this podcast, I decided to set myself a challenge, right? I'd never done a podcast before. I've listened to quite a number of podcasts. I've watched a number of times. So I said, okay, let me try and use AI to generate everything I'll need for this podcast, almost even to recording a bit. And so the name China AI was one that I developed on a car trip. I was moving from one spot to the other, 40 minutes drive, and I just went back and forth with in this case I was in ChatGPT, just back and forth, suggesting different names, telling it the kind of name I want. I want it warm. I want it something with a bit of a rhyme and so forth, and and we ended up sort of like with different options, and finally I picked China AI. Right. So the name was, through AI, working with AI. The logo that you're seeing in the background, and you're going to be seeing a lot, also developed using AI, right? The thinking process of how we're going to structure the podcast and how it's going to look like, same thing, right? So the team that I'm using in terms of supporting me in terms of production and putting this out, that came much, much later. Right. And so this is just to give you a sense of just how powerful AI can be if you know what the limits are and if you sort of like use it with the right kind of mind frame. Because you need to have a certain mind frame to be able to get, very good output from AI. From AI. Yeah. So just to put it plainly, I don't think I would have been able to do this using AI, but it would have costed more. Probably would have taken much longer. But as I mentioned, I was able to move and iterate quite fast. So if you then look at my AI use, just really moved in just the last 3 years, 4 years now in this case, and I really hope to get you to the point where I'm at this point. Now, something very important, and this is one of the frameworks I really like. I'm going to be dropping different nuggets here and there that I've learned over a period of time. The first one is this 10-80-10 framework, which I really like. I got it from a book. I can't remember what the book was. Yeah, what was the name of that book? It was I forget the name anyway. Probably will post it here. But the 10-80-10 rule, and I like it from an AI perspective, is where you need to put in some effort when you're using AI. There's a first 10% in terms of the query that you need to really write a really good query. Then you need to allow AI to do the 80%, the heavy lifting in this case. But then at the end, you also need to put in another 10%, 20%, whatever it is in this case, but really just to make sure that the output you've received is exactly what you need and it's tailored to the final user. I'll speak about some of the challenges you have with AI in a bit, but then that's an important thing. So you always have to remember that my query has to be really good. AI will do a bit of the heavy lifting, but I also have to put in some effort at the end just to make sure I get the right kind of output that I need in this case. How I use AI today, I use it for all manner of use cases, right? I've used from a personal perspective, if I'm drafting lesson plans for my kids, I sort of like it's assignments, it's during the holidays, I need something really quick. I use it for recipes, I use it for telling stories. Every so often I'm invited as an MC for family events. I use it for, the jokes I'm going to share, right? As funny as that. And just to give you a funny story that, over the weekend I was an MC at a family event and it was a Kikuyu, event in this case. And just to tell you how far it has come, ChatGPT was able to give me some good, proverbs in this case, in Kikuyu that I was able to use for that conversation, which is really fascinating. Then I use it for negotiations, prepare for negotiations, where I know what my position is, and I'm just trying to see what other things I need to be aware of, so that then I can better prepare for the conversation in this case. So really good use case in this case. There are things even negotiating with it, going voice mode and just having a proper negotiation, and then you sort of like ask it, how did I do in that negotiation? And it gives you feedback and tells you, you're too soft here, you're too hard here, you should have thought about this and this. I use it as a strategy, a sparring partner, right? At times I'm very clear, a few ideas, but I want to just check out, are there any other ideas I need to be thinking about? And I'll ask you, just share with me 5 other different options in this case. And if you share with me these options, then I'll think about them, I'll play around with them, and eventually I'll decide what I want. I have to put in my final 10% to decide this is what I want to do at the end of the day. I used to draft, summarize, and prepare. I'm going for a meeting, or maybe I've come from a meeting, I've recorded the notes from that meeting. I'll use AI to just summarize the notes and maybe prepare the minutes in this case. At times to prepare the follow-up email that I need to send out. Find it very useful for those kind of things. It's a large language model in this case. I use it to review documents. I received a document, of course, confidentiality is very important here. So you have to make sure that the kind of documents you're putting out there and how you've set up your AI and what kind of AI you're using in this case. There's a personal side of things, and there's the office subscriptions that you can make. Those tend to have better security, so to say, and they don't tend to train the models. But you can use it to review all manner of documents, whether it's policies, whether it's KPI documents, to check whether they meet the standard that you expect them to be. Of course, you have to train the AI first to be able to do those things. I mean, the use cases are, quite a number. You want to do a blog, you can share your thoughts, and after you've trained it in terms of your language, the AI can share with you sort of like an initial draft, then you can edit that, you can share it out. You're doing a training, I'm doing a training somewhere, I have my slides, I need to update them and use it to do some of the initial research, and then I'll sort of update that research into my slides, and then I'll share those. It's stuff like Claude at the moment. You can also just be able to prepare the actual slides you're going to use, and it gives a really decent set of slides that then you can be able to take and make some edits and then share it out. Right? I use for practical issues, right? One of the use cases I really love nowadays is where, I don't know, I'm having an issue with my printer at home and I need to, I don't know, do 1, 2, 3, I'll query it. So this is the issue I'm facing. You tell me, take a photo of this, take a photo of this, maybe it's a wiring and so forth. And it will give me sort of like a step-by-step solution in terms of this is what you need to do. I don't know, I'm having a problem with a solar system at home, and I need to check out a few things. In this case, whether the cables have been plugged properly, whether the settings are okay. I'll sort of like ask, and then I'll check. And of course, sometimes you need to have a healthy dose of skepticism. So don't take everything that it tells you in this case. So I'll try and push back a bit to just see whether it's referencing the right kind of documents and so forth. But I used to fix issues, right? And it's been very good. There are times I would have needed to invite someone, a technical person, and I would have to pay them, but I'm able to do that just in the house very quickly using AI, taking photos and going back and forth. This is an advisor in this case. As I mentioned, I like being out in nature, steps, sleeping, and so forth. So I fed it my details from the app that I use in this case, and I told it, what do you think about my health patterns and so forth. And it tells me, what you need to walk more, you need to, I don't know, eat better, you need to do that. That's something. Then it's able to customize that because then I have really good data that I've collected over a period of time. The times I've gone to the hospital, the doctor is telling me I need to do one, two, three. I type it on ChatGPT, I prepare really well, and it gives me sort of like different questions I need to ask in this case, or even just to cross-check what I'm hearing at the end of the day. So yeah, it's a co-pilot in my life. I think it's like an extra brain that I have in this case that I just rely on every so often to see what's up. So, you can use AI for so many things. Now, something that's very important when using AI, and we're just about to come to an end to this first session. I found that it's good to understand AI so that you can use it effectively. Right? I don't want to make this technical, but I just want to give you just some maybe ways of thinking about AI that will help you to be able to know how to use AI better. The first thing is, AI is not a software. Yeah, and that's very important. Most of us think of AI as a software. The software, if you double click on the open, bit, it opens a sheet. If you click on, maybe you want to color a cell to red, if you click on that, it colors it to red, for argument's sake. AI does not work like that, right? AI is like this really sharp intern that needs to be trained, that has been trained with a lot of information from the internet. And, for your own purpose, you have to train it more. You have to give it context so that it understands how you're going to be how you want information to be relayed to you, who exactly you are, what kind of language you want the information to be relayed using. When you ask these, what do you exactly mean, and so forth. Just imagine if you had an intern, in this case, who's really sharp. You wouldn't just on day one just tell them, go out there and prepare for me slides for this session that I have without giving them a lot of context. You'll have to tell them, I need slides on this session that I'm going to be having. Maybe it's about AI. So I need 10 slides that for you to prepare for me. This is a sample of the kind of slides that I'd like you to prepare for me. Make sure that it covers slide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, has the following kind of context, etc. And what you're doing in this case is you're training this person to know exactly how you think, how you want your output to be shared, and so forth, right? And so it's very important that when you're working with AI, don't think about it as a software. Think about it as an intern that you need to train to be able to get the best output from. And just something else about context, which I really like talking about, is this idea that in the normal human conversations, they say that 93% of the communication is usually nonverbal. Right? It's cited as nonverbal based on the research you look at, right? 55% is body language, 38% is tone of voice, and 7% only is what is the actual words. AI has been trained using a lot of course, words. It's a large language model. And so context is not something it's very good, strong with. You have to feed it the context so that it's able to answer the questions, respond the way you want it to respond. And so if you think about this idea of 93% is non-verbal, just imagine then how much context you have to give to these, intern that you work with to make sure that when they're writing, when they're giving you feedback, the context has been taken into account in this case. So AI does not know who you are. When you start your query on the first day, it doesn't know whether you're a farmer in, in Africa or whatever it is. It doesn't know whether you're a neurosurgeon in Nairobi, in this case. It doesn't know who you are. And so you have to give it context so that it knows how to respond to you, right? It will always try to guess over a period of time, but it's much easier if you just tell it, this is who I am, this is how I like you to respond, and so forth. So the context is very critical in this case. At the back, and I think, for the technical guys, I'm going to butcher this, so please just take it as it is. At the back, just remember that AI is mathematical models. There's no one at the back who's the intern who's answering this question as you're asking. There's no human at the back. So it's mathematical model. It tries to predict. If you ask a question, it tries to predict based on word after word, what's the best, next word that I need to predict, in this case, to give you the answer you're looking for. So it doesn't really understand what you're asking. When you ask AI, I'm preparing a presentation on private equity and venture capital in Africa. Please prepare for me 10 slides to introduce the topic and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't understand that as a question. It just goes and looks at all the data it has been trained using. And the data is from the internet, right? And then it says, what can I string together to make sure that I answer this question using probabilities, so to say. So I'm going to use something technical here. So AI is not deterministic. AI is probabilistic. So it just uses probabilities to determine what the next word is going to be. And maybe we'll touch more on this, as we move on. And that's such an important thing in this case. If you've I mean, I don't want to say that you forget everything I'm going to speak about today, but I'm just going to say that if you don't understand how AI functions, how it's been created, you're going to find it very difficult to get the kind of output that you think is going to be useful for you as you work with it. AI is not only for tech people, it's for everyone. Yeah. I know, with the different models and the prices, it can be a bit difficult for you in this case, especially if you have to pay for the model. But I think the free versions already offer quite a bit in this case. So you can use it for writing, you can use it for, meetings, for analysis, for planning decisions, all the different use cases I spoke about. So I think AI can help you with quite a number of things as you go along. Okay, just about to, wrap this up, but just what do you expect going forward on this podcast? I think the first thing is that we're going to be featuring some really exciting speakers, founders, investors, operators. I'm curious to, feature founders who are sort of like trying to use AI to solve some, interesting challenges in the continent, in this case. So I think that's going to be exciting. And you'll hear more how people are using AI in the continent to solve some interesting challenges. Maybe eventually also go international, but at least I want to focus on the continent first. Investors who've chosen to make investments in the AI space. So I want you just to hear what people are looking, what people find interesting, what they're seeing in the market, where they see AI going in this case. Operators, who are spending time just, on a day-to-day basis, operating companies and so forth, but just hearing what's their AI story in terms of implementation within the organizations and so forth. Really, at the end of the day, what we want to get is just tools, how we can use this as a tool, lessons of things we can just follow in the future where things are going. So it's real use cases, no fluff, right? I want you to, every episode, once you leave, you have a real use case that you can be able to apply for the AI in this case. Now, for the podcast, we're going to be having some signature questions, right? I will ask all the guests these 3 questions, right? The first question is going to be, of course, I'll ask them now a story about the AI and how they use AI and where they see it going and so forth. We'll have a conversation with them just as very natural. But at the end, I'll ask always 3 questions. The first one is what one AI habit saves them a lot of time. And I'm hoping that through that, then you'll be able to see how you can use AI a bit better. Then one underrated breakthrough they see from AI, and they can share more with us about that. And then, this question is an interesting one. If they had unlimited AI resources, what would they use that to solve? Right? I'm really curious to see what people are going to be saying about that. And I will try to answer those questions as myself, keeping it brief. Well, for me, the one AI habit that saves a lot of time is this idea of just giving good context. Yeah, you cannot overemphasize giving good context. And there's different ways of doing this. Before you ask something from AI, just giving the context. A simple one is COG, right? Simple, where you give it context, you give it the output you desire and the guardrails, right? So for instance, I'm preparing a LinkedIn post after moderating a VC session. Output, draft for me a good post that I can put out around these guardrails. I want it to be 150 words. I want it to be professional but warm. No emojis, please, and include some key insights. 3 key insights. Very simple, but then you get some really, you get some good ideas from it. I can do it add maybe the guardrail. Please give me 3 different variations, which then I can take and then I can use for that. Another way of doing this is the rocket approach. I won't give an example for this, but this is where you give it a role. You tell it, act as a CFO, a lawyer, a strategy advisor, whatever it is. Objective. We're trying to review this document in this case. So I want you to review the document on my behalf. The context is that we are reviewing this document for our own organization. What we care about is ABCD, the key constraints as you're reviewing it. Make sure that you give me the final report in Microsoft Word, in PowerPoint, not more than 10 pages, whatever it might look like. Here is an example of the kind of output I want, and you attach that either as a document or you just type it in this case. And then, the target output in this case is this, like how I want the output to look exactly, in bullets, in slides, the checklist, and so forth. So it's called the rocket approach, right? The role, the objective, the context, the key constraints, the examples and the target output. So that's one of the key habits I really, have found to be very useful when I'm using AI. The second question that I'm going to be asking about the breakthrough that I've found in AI to be very useful, and I'm just going to say agents, right? We'll speak more about these things, but just having agents that help you to do different things. Please try and create an agent. I've created one for summarizing receipts. When I receive receipts and I need to summarize them for my for a finance manager, I just add it in, and the thing is able to sort of like extract the amount, is able to extract the PIN number for the organization, for myself and for the organization in this case that I went to in this case, and whether it's a receipt for the company or it's for who exactly. It's able to summarize whether the currency in this case, able to summarize what the cost was for specifically. So really fascinating in this case, and then it's able to do this in a spreadsheet and just I'm able to share this at the end of the month, right? This is something that used to take me a lot of hours just to put together. So, agents, and you can do agents for several things. That's just one of the agents I thought just to share. And then for the key breakthrough that I think, AI. So if I had unlimited resources on AI, I would really like to solve the funding issue, right, in the continent. Like and let me explain more how. I think that there's a lot of biases that sit between someone sending a proposal to a funder and the funder reviewing that and the funder sort of like responding. So I'm just interested in how do you sort out these biases that sit in here, right? Money goes to people who came from the same school, who write in a particular way, who have a particular gender, particular geography in this case. How do we try to just address this issue, right? And I don't know how we'll do it, but I would really want to spend time with AI just to make sure that if you send the information, it's received exactly how the investor needs to receive it. So that when they're reviewing it, they're not reviewing it with the biases. They're just reviewing the information as it is, the opportunity as it is, and so they're able to make their decision in this case. So it helps to prepare much better. It helps you to write in the right kind of way and so forth. And when the investor is sharing your feedback, also the same thing, that the information that you sent is the information that's received. So I think that's what I would spend quite a bit of time just trying to resolve in this case. Okay, so thanks for joining for this first episode. We want to just wrap it up. I think the key thing just to remember from this is that I hope that by the time you're done with this podcast, you'll feel more curious, right? You will feel more capable. You'll feel that there's some practical skills that you've gotten that you're able to use in this case on a day-to-day basis. We're going to be doing this podcast, every 2 weeks, a new episode, new guests, new conversations. So let's see how that goes. My call to you is please follow the podcast. Please share with a friend that you think this might be useful for. Please suggest guests. We really want to get some really A-rate guests. As a matter of fact, we have some 2 guests coming up, an entrepreneur and an investor who I think just the perfect guest to get this show on the road. So if you have people that you think we should be talking to, please share that. And of course, if you need any advisory support in terms of, how to roll out, AI in your organization, please reach out and then we can see how to support. So thank you very much for joining this Chai na AI podcast, episode number 1. We want to, make sure that you are able to take, all the context that you've heard about AI and just bring it to reality. We want to make AI doable, one conversation at a time. Thank you and see you in the next one.